If you're into speaking to audiences, you need to be a lifelong learner. You need to be continually improving yourself as a speaker. One of the aspects of public speaking is the tools of trade. And one element of those tools of trade is, of course, vocabulary. The words you use, colourful words, emotive words, words that get into the hearts and minds of people. I've referred to this book a number of times. Dale Carnegie was obviously a master. He was a genius. Several of his books have been bestsellers, and they're still bestsellers today. In this particular passage, I'd like to read what Dale Carnegie said about the importance of Abraham Lincoln's world-famous speech, the Gettysburg Address. Here's what he says. Lincoln's address has been cast in imperishable bronze and placed in a library at Oxford as an example of what can be done with the English language. It ought to be memorized by every student of public speaking. Well, I certainly haven't memorized it, but I do know the opening lines. But I'll read beyond them here. Just a few lines out of this most famous of probably all speeches. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as the final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. So what am I saying here to you? You need to be able to develop a vocabulary which can instantly spring to mind as you're speaking to an audience. So how can you develop that? I would suggest that, as it's suggested in this book, read widely. Read from the great authors. Read from stories written by master storytellers. People such as Robert Louis Stevenson. Now, in his book, Treasure Island, for example, which is a fabulous book, I've read it about 8 times over the years, you will pick up words. The way you pick up words is by reading, and they are added in some way to your vocabulary. And if there's a word that you don't understand, look it up in the dictionary. And then put it into a sentence, write it out 2 or 3 times, make it yours. If you just add one colourful, meaningful, strong word to your vocabulary, even if you only do 1 a week, that's 52 in a year, and 520 or so in 10 years. Now the point is this. You might think, well, what's that? What's 500 odd different words compared with what I know now? Don't you kid yourself. You might think that you know 100,000 words. You might understand them when you're reading them in a book. You might even be able to use 10,000 of those words when you're writing an essay. But when you're speaking to an audience, you're probably down to about 15 or 1,600 words. That's it. You can add another 500 to it. You've made a big percentage. You've added a big percentage to your vocabulary, your spoken vocabulary. And it's your spoken vocabulary, the vocabulary you use when you're talking to people and talking to an audience, that you need to add to. These are your tools of trade. The more you have of them at your immediate disposal, the better the speaker, the more powerful speaker, the more influential speaker, the more persuasive speaker, the more transformational speaker you will be. Do not neglect adding words to your vocabulary. It's probably one of the best things you can do for yourself and for your audience as a speaker.